And here's Vic. Thank you for coming too. Please take a seat. You are just in the nick of time. Anywhere. Dan is going live on YouTube any second. Dan has just gone live on YouTube. Hello to the other couple people besides Shannon who are on the YouTube channel. At some point when we're deeper into the discussions, you can participate by entering comments. Dan will watch out for them. We have all of our board members here. Myself, David Shore, Chair, Vice Chair Shannon Thielman's on the phone, and Rory Nutter has set all our technology up here in person. We have Ashley Lang, Melissa Johnson, Katie Rosenberg, and Jay Jackson. All board members on the phone. We have two additional board members besides Shannon, who are Pat Scogan and Cindy Carter. We have another caucus member, Vic Verma, who's just arrived, more importantly, from another part of the state, which is also good. And we're expecting a new caucus member who's en route from the Milwaukee area momentarily. But the first agenda item, before we start talking more about strategic planning and strategic goals, is to have Dan, who's been crunching a lot of data from the November election, to get us in the mood by running through some analysis.
I'm a little concerned about the mood we're going to be in after that, but
he's got this expectation.
So I'm going to keep this relatively brief. As you guys can see, we can't get the projector running in here today, so I'm not going to be able to put numbers up for you guys to actually look at. So I'm afraid I'm just going to have to say what we're looking at here and go from there. I will briefly introduce this by saying that I'm engaging on a data analysis project of my own for Wisconsin election results, primarily because we have a real problem getting good data unless we feel like paying a lot of money for it. So what I have been doing is compiling a database of all Wisconsin election results down to the ward level for this current redistricting. So back to the 2013 redistricting. That's the finest resolution that we can get, obviously, on voter data, is what's happening at the wards. That data set will then be overlaid on a geographical information system with a base map that has a resolution of 10 meters. So we can then overlay other data sets like van data down to individual household level if we want to at some point in the future. But the core idea here is just to give us some good numbers to work with. I am a data file. I have to have numbers. I honestly, I can't buy a stick of deodorant without two hours of research. So, and I hope that I'm doing good research on that. If I'm not, please let me know.
It's a big room.
Yeah, so, this is obviously in an early stage. I'm working right now just with the 2018 election, looking at the numbers so that we can get a sense of how we really did, where we did well, where we didn't do well, and try to make some sense out of what's happened.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
Is it your goal to have only 2018 and forward, or are you going to look backwards? Like, are we going to be able to see, oh, we lost ground here, kind of a thing?
Absolutely, that's the plan. I'm going all the way back actually to 2010. So
nice.
We will be able to look at trends over time.
Cool.
And this is not just statewide elections. We're doing it all the way down to city races, county boards, et cetera. If somebody votes in Wisconsin, I want it in the database so that we have it to look at. Okay. And Obviously this is gonna be a public resource at some point. Right now it's in.
Public?
What's that?
Public?
Well, if Scott Walker calls me up and asks for it, I might say no. But for Democrats, Democratic campaigns, that's what I'm looking at. And my goal is to give people not just an analysis product, although I'd be happy to do that, but I want to be able to make certain everybody's got raw data that is good and solid, that comes directly from the state, unfiltered, so that they can do what they want with it, rather than relying on somebody else to make a judgment call for them.
So you're still relying on the van, though, as it relates to voter information?
Actually, I'm not going to put the van data
Okay.
in. I will leave that to the campaigns.
Sketchball.
Yeah,
It's kind of crap sometimes.
yeah. No, I am filling up
Because of a
the,
band assumption.
yeah. I am relying purely on Wisconsin Election Commission and Government Accountability Board, and literally down to the individual reports that come out of the town clerks
Okay.
on the ward data
Yep.
as they come out.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, it's unfiltered. It's raw data. If you guys want data analysis on it, it can be done. But the intention is to give people something to work with rather than something to buy that they can use. So that said, taking a look at how we did this last year. David said set the mood. I hope everyone remembered their Prozac this morning, because
Tell
Yeah.
them, but
yeah,
We do know how few legislative races
yeah.
were won.
Well, and I
Right.
could see Marathon County,
Oh, yeah.
what happened there with governor, for instance.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be a shocker.
So, yeah, we actually, I have to say, the governor's race is a little bit of a bright spot. We did actually win the governor's race. Even if you include all of the other things that went on. There was a lot of side vote in the governor's race. There's a couple of percentage out with the Libertarians and the Greens,
Okay.
et cetera. But, if you make some logical choices about how those people would have distributed their votes to the main candidates, we squeak out a victory, I think, in the governor's race, no matter what. It is a narrow victory. That is absolutely clear. I mean, we cleared by about 30,000 votes.
It's not a lot.
No, with the side vote. There was about 65,000 votes distributed amongst other candidates.
What was the margin between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump? It was
22,
Yeah.
I believe, 21,
so.
22,
But if you
something
look
like
at that and you say 30,000, we won by 30,000. Governor Evers did. There's a 55 or 52. Because I would think some of the people who voted for Donald Trump, it sounds like there may have been a shift over to Governor Evers.
Well,
It depends on turnout time.
yeah, this is where things get a little complicated. Turnout, I've got the historical numbers here, so we can look at that as well.
Sure.
Turnout for the presidential election across the state was, for the presidential vote, just a tad short of 3 million, 2,976,000. This governor's race was short of that by about 300,000 votes, which is kind of surprising. Total turnout for the governor's race was 2,673,000, so a little more than 300,000 down from the presidential. That's, like I said, there are some surprising things in that. We thought we would see more, but where we actually did see better turnout was in heavily Democratic areas. Madison and Milwaukee,
Fired up.
they just
Okay.
blew the top off of
Thank
it, and
goodness.
that's what carried
We
us
did,
over.
we did well. We did well.
Everybody, I gotta say, around the state, we did okay.
I mean, my district
Yeah.
did well.
Yeah. And with this kind of margin, every single door knocked counts.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. So, I think that if we're gonna carry a message out of the gubernatorial campaign, it's that the get out the vote effort is what got us there this year. But that kind of means that our messaging isn't getting us there. And I think we're going to see that as I go on here more and more as we talk about some of the down ballot races.
Just one more question, and maybe that's something.
The messaging thing is pretty obvious. We have really bad messaging as Democrats, and that is something I wish we could get much better at, because the Republicans have mastered it. We have not.
We're getting better, and we're here to help.
Make our
Yeah.
messaging great again.
I completely agree with you, and I'm wondering the effect of, in the counties where there was a marijuana referendum.
Oh, the Republicans are already going after that. I'm
Yep.
seeing it in all of that.
All
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because there were actually two side candidates this year. Green Party candidates, Anderson and White, and I kind of put a quotation mark around Green Party because they weren't officially running as Green Party candidates, but
Oh.
they identified publicly
Sure.
as Green Party. That they made the marijuana referendum a central part of their messaging,
Makes sense.
and also there was an independent, Turnbull and her running mate Loesch. They are kind of a funny set. I am kind of sort of lumping them in with the Greens. They have their platform tracked the Green Party, but then they also had a lot of sort of fiscal responsibility, reinvestment in infrastructure, more conservative or middle of the road things in their platform as well. They actually did quite well. They did. The two between those two campaigns, they pulled in almost 30,000 votes, which is our margin of victory.
Wow.
And I think it's safe to say that the gross majority of those were taken from Democratic candidates. So we've got a lesson maybe to be learned there. Even though, given that though, as I said, if you redistribute the libertarian vote to Walker, take those two Green candidates to Evers, and then there's a smattering of about 3,000 other votes. There was a protest candidate out who got about $3,000 on a everybody else sucks, vote for me type platform. I take those guys and I just cut them in half and distribute them equally because I figure there's just as many angry Republicans as there are angry Democrats, so we'll go with that way. We come out ahead still in this election by 20 to 30,000 votes. Okay, so we won it. We won it. We did. It's a legitimate victory there.
Neither comfortable nor a squeaker, basically.
Yeah, it's in the I would like more than 30,000.
We want more comfort,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah. I had to say 30,000 votes. We had bad weather in the north on election day. That might have been enough. That might have been enough. I remember I was in India on election day, and I remember sitting there watching that storm system and just going, "Go, baby, dump that snow, yes, do it."
Disenfranchise the northern part of the state.
Yeah, that could have been it, because 30,000 votes, that's not a whole lot. So the lesson here, every vote counts. It does in this state. We are deeply divided, as we will see in other races as we look. And we've got to stay on the get out the vote campaign, and we've got to hit messaging better, because we're not pulling red votes blue at the state level. We are just not selling the product. Okay, we got to do better on that. So that's the governor's race. Secretary of State, I'm just going to kind of skip over. Doug LaFollette has that seat for life.
He doesn't even have to make an argument. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. Well,
Like, I'm here, vote for me.
yeah, 36 years now, Secretary of State. Interestingly,
It might be 20.
there was some question about this race this year. LaFollette made a stab at the governor's primary during the recall, And then a couple of years ago, he filed suit against Scott Walker over the state budget.
Right.
And it was looked at, I remember at the time he did that, people kind of looked at that suit as maybe he's teeing up another governor run with that. But the lawsuit kind of crashed and burned, and really all it did was piss off the Republicans. And so there was,
One of our statewide candidates did get more votes, and she must have done better at this challenge of peeling off some of theirs.
we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. There was actually two statewide candidates who were in that category, and we'll talk about both of them because there's some interesting stuff with both. But yeah, so Lafayette this year, he kind of had a middle of the road campaign for him. He's done better in the past. He's done worse in the past. He pulled in almost 53% of the vote.
By just keeping his head down.
Yeah, and so there you go.
He didn't spend a nickel on,
Yeah.
you know.
Kids, do not try this at
If
home.
you go to the Madison Farmers Market, maybe he'll shake his hair.
Oh yeah, it's right. You know,
That's the only place I've ever seen him.
he comes to the Dane County board meetings. He walked up to me and he stuck out his hand and said, "Hi, I'm Doug Lafayette. I'm running for Secretary of State." So, in fact, you were like the first vote I ever cast. You know, I mean, like, how do I not know you? But yeah, you know, so at least we've got one solid Democratic candidate forever.
That's not our answer, though.
Yeah,
No, it's not the future.
Yeah.
No.
Let's, you know, but I don't think there's anything we can learn from that race, so I'm just going to leave it out of anymore today. More important, I believe, and more concerning. Josh Call pulled off a squeaker by 17,000 votes. Okay. This year, for the first year, the Constitution Party ran a candidate. He took 47,000 votes.
Holy crap.
Absent that
Can't remember his
third-party candidate, Larson,
Larson, that's right.
absent that third-party candidate, Schimmel's still Attorney General
Yeah, yeah.
by a good chunk.
Wow.
Schimmel wins that race by the same margin that we took the governor's house. Now, that's not an unexpected result so much. The Attorney General races always run a little red.
We had JB Van Hollen, I mean,
Yeah.
when and Doyle won at the same time, right? Wasn't that the?
Yeah. The Attorney General, there's always
Sure.
that law and order thing. And, you know, our candidates have to run a little more to the middle, a little more
Right.
right. in
But wasn't that
campaign.
right after Peg Schlager had like
The
a
acid.
DUI?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
we had kind of a very testy primary with
Right,
Falk and
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
and
yeah,
to
yeah.
be honest, and I hope Josh Call's not watching to hear me say that, that incident, if you look back, was kind of the start of the decline of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin.
I feel like there are multiple things, but
Yeah, then it was that next cycle, we took that, we held everything except the Attorney General's office in that next election, and then things really started to come apart. But, you know, that's ancient history.
we got healthcare, so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah, you know, we've got the Attorney General.
Hold that thought.
Okay. I'm just thinking about who gambled that in. I mean, that was Dave Bowie, right? Like, that was a thing that happened.
Oh, no, but, yeah, right.
Um,
We've got it as a winner.
Yeah. I mean, not because I'm cold, but because it was cool.
Thanks. Continue.
What can we take away from this race and the result here? The big issue in this race was at least one of the big issues. I think the biggest was the healthcare lawsuit. It was the Obamacare lawsuit and whether the state was going to continue it. That was what was front and center in this race, and we didn't come over the top on it.
Hold on, what are you saying?
So this is the Attorney General's race, and what
Oh,
everybody talked about.
you're saying the association, there should have been a closer association with his race, and that's one of the ones that we struggled with.
Well, I mean, if we as a central issue right now, healthcare Democrats believe is ours, right?
Yeah.
This race.
Well,
is
and the Republicans
else.
believe it's ours to the extent that they're now trying to take it.
Right.
exactly
Right.
So
So why isn't it, why are you saying this rather than saying, well, the HE race, we start with a deficit and it tends to skew that way?
Josh Call was really Tony Evers, healthcare, and education.
Yep.
He was on message constantly. These are things that people care about. Josh Call was back and forth between the rape kits and which, not diminishing the need to make sure that those things are processed efficiently and effectively, but he didn't zero in on healthcare the way Tony Evers did, the way Tammy Baldwin did.
Tammy Baldwin.
That's all.
Yep.
That's winner. Yeah.
Right, and so you're offering a rather counterintuitive take to say that we didn't succeed in leveraging this issue in this strength.
But Josh Call could have won. What he's saying is Call could have won by a bigger margin.
Should have hammered that home.
To hammer that home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The legislative
So I'm
candidates
getting
hammer
back to
home.
this messaging piece.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
that he didn't
do it enough.
leverage it. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I'm with you, okay.
Yeah, we should have owned it,
Yeah.
and we didn't.
People are scared, right?
Yes.
We remember the angry town halls. We remember Feingold losing on
Right.
multiple things, but that was one of them. He was getting, right?
I want to, this is an important question because, again, my perception at this point compared, let's say, with 3 or 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
My perception is that we're standing tall on healthcare. And Katie, you're kind of not,
I don't
you're
know.
not convinced
No,
that we are.
I'm just saying, now we are, but I think the less, we're still kind of traumatized.
Shy,
Yeah,
yeah.
from what happened with the Tea Party. I mean,
Mhm.
that is still in my mind, going to those town hall meetings and listening to those people yell at
Right.
Feingold or yell at whoever. I mean, it was,
No, I remember. I thought
That's not where we are now, though.
We'd kind of, gotten
I
to it.
think that's actually turned 180 from the standpoint of when the repeal effort started in 17, the whole narrative switched.
Right.
sure.
And
But
so,
there's still a bit of, I think, reticence. I think it showed in Call because he didn't.
yeah. But it's a reticence they need to.
Okay.
Right.
So, all right.
Correct. Yeah. Get rid of it
Yeah,
because
it's in something.
yeah,
Okay.
we don't want you to lose your house because you have breast cancer.
Hold nothing back.
Agreed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, my core point that I'm gonna come to at the end of all this, and I think this is our biggest example of it, is that we've got to be proactive on issues. We cannot keep sitting back and reacting and letting the Republicans set the agenda. It's gotta be out front.
That's what winners do.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Well, look at it, the day before the Super Bowl, right? And then, here we go. So that's,
Can I just interject something quick? We're talking about messaging, and I don't know who referred to it as Obamacare, but that was one of the biggest mistakes the Democrats
I
made.
agree.
It should have always been referred to as the Affordable Care Act, because when you talk to people, they want Obamacare gone, but when you ask them if they want the Affordable Care Act gone, it's a whole other story.
Yep.
So we basically messed up our own messaging by referring to it as Obamacare, following the steps of the Republicans. That is something we made a mistake on. We have to be careful like that stuff, because it should have always been referred to as the Affordable Care Act. Always, by us, all the time.
I'm going to be a little, I agree with that to a certain extent. I disagree with that to a certain extent because people, first of all, the Obamacare name was set by the Republicans.
Right.
They did that for the.
It was pejorative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when I used to have, when I was in Texas, I advocated on LECA and everything, and at some point it was like, we just called it Obamacare. Because we had to own it.
No.
And then we had to own it, and people weren't knowing, for better or worse, did not always resonate with the Affordable Care Act.
It's audience dependent.
We referred to it as the Affordable Care Act because this actually came from the Heritage Foundation. This legislation came from the Heritage Foundation, which is a very conservative think tank, which is very in line with the ALEC agenda. So if we would have brought that on the way it should have been brought on,
Yeah.
it would have never been turned upon us like it has been.
But I would argue that we've seen a 20-point or 30-point increase in the popularity of it, and they're still calling it a home care.
So let's hold that question open, and I think it is an interesting one, but we're not going to resolve it today, which is.
We want to take
when-
the time to.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome our
Brittany.
guests.
Well,
Okay,
thank
no,
you
that's
very
okay.
much for
Yeah,
coming.
Yeah.
Brittany has in the meantime arrived from the eastern part of the state. And what I was going to say is that what we're fighting about here is the Republicans having driven that name as hard as they did. If we had been equally stubborn, could we have, kept more space open and not let the name take hold the way it did? I don't know. That's what we're not going to resolve today. But here's what else is true. Remember the Nancy Pelosi quip, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in the bill. We were stuck for 4 years, 2010 to 2014, and to some extent even a little later until repeal and replace was tried in 2017, right? We had to go all that time with the disadvantage of their being able to talk about, a boogeyman, and say whatever they wanted. We had to live with the reality taking that long to take hold, and whatever we might argue about the label, that was a bigger problem. I would offer that was a bigger challenge for us, a steeper climb than the name.
But so from the data and from what you're saying, and what you're saying, and moving on, is that what we've done is that Shannon on the phone?
No, that's Pat. Shannon is also on the phone.
Okay.
I believe that was you, Pat, talking, yes? About messaging?
No,
Oh, is it Cindy?
wasn't me. Yeah, it was me.
Cindy, thank you. Okay, I need to learn to be able to.
Yeah. So the
Thank you,
most
Cindy.
important thing is Republicans do this really well. They hit at emotional sort of issues, and they get people responding emotionally. Tammy Baldwin got people responding emotionally about healthcare, and it mattered. We have to stop. We can do the data analysis. I love data too. I love the data analysis. Use it so that we can drive home a personal message that people can connect with, and we don't appear to be elite throwing facts and figures and data around. That is the success.
I agree with that, because I did that
This
for
is
Tammy.
Ted. Can I have
I did
a
that for Tammy in Wausau for a press conference. So, a car accident, was in the hospital for a month and rehab for 3 months. I've advocated for the ACA forever,
Yeah.
but whatever I've said about the facts of the ACA was probably about 1%.
Yeah. So it's all
And
about.
Shannon was in one of the TV spots.
Absolutely.
Right.
It was brilliant, and there are a number of other ones. Those are the kind of things people connect with.
And you do need the data to inform that, though.
Yeah,
You really-
you do. You've got to have that to back it up, but you don't want to stand there and go blah, 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 blah.
Before we go back to Dan, Pat wanted to get in, and then Katie. Pat? All right.
Yeah.
Pat, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I do, and I wanted to bring the group's attention to the race that Chris Marion ran against Howard Markline in the 17th Senate. She did exactly what you're talking about. She announced in February, and by July she had Howard Markline appearing in his Cambridge shirt and blue jeans in a cornfield talking about water quality.
Interesting, huh?
Yes, if you can go to Chris Marion, her state senate, or Wisconsin Senate, I think his Facebook page, and just go back and read all of her posts. She is media like crazy. You'll remember that she was on the cover of Instagram, perhaps, about is this the one who will flip the Senate. She really came close, and it was our rural areas in southwest Wisconsin, of course, we just completed that big water study for 42 of the wells are contaminated. That she really, I think really the only reason she lost was number one, the Republican Party, because of all of the media attention she got. They could see that she had a full head of steam. They just dumped money in like crazy that last 3 weeks, 2 weeks. But also just that out here in the boonies in southwestern Wisconsin, you have a lot of people who are just loyal Republicans, and they're going to vote Republican. That's why you see some of that disparity between such big Evers win and then Jeff Knight not winning, Mike Mooney not winning, Chris Marion not winning the Senate. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
She really did set the environmental message. She did it in a positive way. She did not talk about too much about what water is done. I mean, she would mention it kind of as a happy thought, but it was like, she said what mattered to her on her phone. All I can say is go to her webpage, see her messaging and how she was doing it, and I think you'll get the idea of how we can get them trying to look like us. Of course, we all know that Claremont did not look like us once the late session started, but it really did make an impact.
No, thank you very much for that. That's really on point for the things that we need to look at.
It's interesting that you actually bring up that race because it's one of the key races from this cycle that I have been looking at very hard.
Yeah.
I
She did say don't throw away those signs. I'm sure she'll learn, yeah.
yeah, I'm sure she will.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it is demonstrative, though. I wasn't going to talk about it today, but since it's been brought up, and I actually mentioned this very race, I think 2 meetings ago, briefly. Chris did run huge. She was tireless. She was fearless. She did her own phone calls. I got 2 calls from her. And I'm not even close to the district. She was everywhere. She was just the best possible candidate that you could possibly imagine, fit the district perfectly. Just, I really thought that we were going to turn that seat. And it seemed like it was going to happen. At the end of the day, the vote came out exactly where it was 4 years ago. Exactly.
And that's what I mean about those loyal Republicans. You know, they're still living in the Gail Schultz Republican era. So they haven't been listening or watching or experiencing, and they're just going to vote Republican because they always have.
Exactly. And this is
starting to change now. I think now the message. I mean, I'm getting more and more people saying to me, "Well, you know, I was Republican during the Bush time or during the Reagan time or whatever." And now I'm really kind of thinking maybe I should be there. I should go back to the Democratic Party. But that's how long it's taken for it to sink in just how far away from our Wisconsin we've become.
and this is why I have kind of chosen it as an example race, because I think it is the perfect demonstration, once again, of my core thesis about all this, which is our messaging isn't getting through. We can run a race like that in Senate 17, where we do everything absolutely right. We've got a great candidate. She's, tireless. We really look good, and then we still don't make a dent in the Republican base. And that's...
Yeah, it's sadly just a big thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of it, but I wish Dale Schultz would have come out in her favor because that might have bumped up enough of his supposed followers to vote for her.
Yeah.
She did, but not as strongly as she would have wished, really. It was like he didn't stand in the way, but he didn't get up and hold her hand either, you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah,
Should have been more unquiet.
whatever the tactics are that we're going to use to break that, I think that, you know, the first part though is just convincing Democrats that the strategy is wrong. That we're on, as a statewide group, we don't have a formula that Republicans will listen to. We haven't figured out how to talk to them in a way that they'll even tune in and listen to our issues. And we see that across.
I think you are exactly right.
Yeah, we see.
I think you're exactly right. Two fronts. Number one is that she had a positive message, and when I was talking about all that money that got poured in that last 3 weeks, the Democratic Party did too, and I can't remember if it was I think it was the Democratic Senate, help me out here, caucus, whatever that group is, the Democratic senators, that group that spent a whole lot of money, and they were extremely negative ads. And so on our channels and radio stations, it was negative Republican ads, negative Democrat ads, negative Republican ads, negative, and people tuned it out. Versus your first meme with the little girl drinking the water, why is clean water important? That is exactly the same meme that Green County is defending on farmland, one of the most active environmental groups, along with the Bayfield group, the Swanee group, the Dutch County group, St. Croix group. That is exactly the same picture and postcard we had on our Green County defending our farmland postcard. And I think that getting that message out is exactly the way to go. And everybody just tells the devs who are throwing all that money in on the negative stuff, just back off.
Yeah.
Back off. Doing a bag of stuff, just not in like that. Doesn't work. It really does not work in our area. You know?
I don't think it works anywhere.
It reinforces that all politicians are crap. So all the positive stuff is about, I want to be a change. I want to bolster our rural economies, our rural towns, our clean drinking water, our tourism. Every positive thing you said, those negative ads just faded. I mean, folks out here say, oh, they're just fighting for, she's just fighting dirty on the Republicans.
I don't understand then what can the response be, because you know out in the 85th they poured a ton of money a few years ago against Mandy Wright, negative. In the last 3 weeks there was no Democratic response. Mandy kept doing her positive stuff, and you know she lost by a handful of votes. So some response is necessary. I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe it just can't be that crank pot negative, but it's a response is necessary.
Is this a rural district?
What I like about Chris
Yes.
is, like you said, she saved her data for a final volley. I'm trying to think of a good example especially when she was one-on-one with Martha, she pretty much avoided. But for example, when she brought up they were asking a debate about the dairy prices, and Howard did the Scott Walker line of, well, if we all eat more cereal and drank more milk, there would be a dairy crisis. And Kristen kind of said, oh, really? Howard, you know better than that. I mean, and then she rattled off the statistics. You know, when we're losing one dairy farm per day, and we lost 500 last year, and we're now below 8,000, which is half of what we had in 2009. There's more than just drinking milk and eating cereal, Howard. I mean,
So maybe we're getting too tactical. I don't know.
Facts of figures.
Do we want to
Yes, well, yes and no. So Katie raises the question, kind of, what kind of analysis and discussion serves our immediate purpose, which is to, you know, basically shift into our next phase, right? You know, we've gotten this far, and I think succeeded in gaining a sense of ourselves, you know, starting to be active, and so what's next?
I have one thing.
Sure. Just to finish the thought that while it is true that, the discussion as we've been having it in the last, 45 minutes does not lead directly to answers to the questions we have today. I think it is getting our heads into the right gear, because, the goals that we do fashion today have to do with winning, have to do especially with the messaging piece of winning, because, our function in life is to take a set of issues and drive them in a way that helps win. So we will want to kind of shift into that next mode of, starting to spell out goals for ourselves, fairly soon this afternoon. But if that's responsive to what you raised.
I'm here for whatever we need.
Right.
I just
And
want to
Vic-
make sure we get there.
And Vic is itching to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to say some more general. The reason I asked about rural district versus urban or suburban is that if it's a rural district, it's probably just not just a problem in Senate District 17. It's a problem in the whole state. It's a problem in the whole country. And I think it's just something. I'm not saying a solution. I'm throwing out this what I think is happening, because even in this past year, which was a very good year for Democrats, in a lot of rural areas, the performance actually went down. It went down a little bit to the governor's race in Lincoln County, where I am. And so that's a trend. And so what's happening, I think, is, and in my old state of Texas, say in principle, the populations are going down in the rural areas as a percentage of the whole states. It's becoming more urbanized and suburban. And the party, state or national, we'll never necessarily say this, but we know that they're going to put all that's where the resources are going to go. So it's something to consider in terms of moving forward. And
how many people have read Catherine Kramer's Politics of Resentment?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I've read excerpts.
I read it, and the conversation has arrived at exactly what she was looking at. Yep. Her study was of rural communities in Wisconsin, and where are they coming from, and her social science method was basically to use coffee cloches for her data. And for those of you who haven't read the book, The Politics of Resentment is about, those more densely populated areas get more. The thing that she heard more than anything was they get all those good public school classes. They get all the kind of enrichment and the AP classes. Now, of course, what gets kind of skirted over is there's a bigger tax base where there's more people, and that's
And it's expanding.
where the resources come from, and the state actually tries to fix some of that imbalance.
David, that's exactly
Right. Yeah.
Stephen's point is a microcosm of that, because we see that the people out in the suburban areas of Stephen's point resent the urban areas because they think they're getting more special attention, because that's where we're putting their investment. And so it is, yes.
I would say too, though, like you do suffer from not having a democratic infrastructure into the rural areas. We've suffered for the last years with having Scott Walker, having Sean Duffy. I mean, they are king up north, right? So we don't have that infrastructure. So now, hopefully, we're going to see a little bit change. They're going to get to know Tony Evers and see what we already know about him and how great he's going to be for everywhere in the state. Build it.
And I think as it relates to the campaigns, I think up in Maryland, Lincoln County, we felt fairly ignored.
Yeah.
We did. Politically. I mean, we're talking like, we're trying to get what we can in for the campaign and everything. And I'm looking at it from the standpoint as the way, from the strategic point of view of the way the party looks at it is, we're losing population in those areas. We're gaining population in the urban and suburban. The suburbans are trending in our direction. The urbans are ours. And they'll never say it publicly, and I understand why they wouldn't. but they'll say, well, why are we gonna spend time there?
So
That's what they
It's harder.
challenge. Yeah, it's hard.
this makes me think of, so I shared a link to the article about Michigan. I don't know how many people clicked on it, but I know how I responded when I read it, and I think it speaks to exactly what Vic is raising, which is, wow, so that's what a state party that's really mobilized resources. You know, that's how you can rock and roll, because you know, kind of the little miniature emblem of our own relationship with this state party, coming back to the meme, right, is like we were good busy bees and did our work and we produced something and we turned to our friends in the, you know, in the office in Madison and said, do this one little thing for us, and they didn't do it. The point being,
Wouldn't that be nice?
well, that's where I was going, exactly, is that, you know, and then I thought to myself when I saw that, you know, what Debbie Stabenow and the Detroit mayor, I think, right, kind of, you know, as complementary power centers, I thought to myself, gee, you know, I'll bet the communications staff in the Michigan State Party, right, because that was the struggle, I'll bet they've got, you know, one full-time just on social media, right? Maybe multiple just on social media. Anyway, so where does that leave us? Did you want to kind of add, you know, your most important key points, or do you feel like we've kind of found our way to most of them? Or?
There's one or two real quick things that I would add to this. One, I think that it is a good wrap on what we've just been talking about on this rural-urban blue-red divide, which is really informed by the treasurer's race this year. If you want to look at how deeply that split is in Wisconsin, this year's treasurer's race is the perfect vehicle for it. Sarah Godlewski won this by a healthy margin. Okay. There was, again, a constitutional party candidate in this race that gathered 60,000 votes, 2.3%. Significant amount. You add that into the Republican candidate, and she wins it by about 50,000 votes. Okay, more than Evers. Okay. The context of that, though, matters, because this was effectively an uncontested race. The Republicans spent the last 10 years trying to get rid of the treasurer's office, and there was no way they were backing a candidate in this race. The guy who ran, his name was Hartwig, basically he was came out of nowhere, raised his hand and said, okay, I'm going to run for treasurer.
Sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, well, the entire Republican infrastructure turned their back on it. They didn't even mention his name on the campaign trail in any of their other races. He raised a grand total of $12,000 and got no other financial support. He didn't even have yard signs.
I saw one up in
Yeah,
Schofield.
I think that, you know, they may have had, you know,
I mean, there.
one match, but
No, maybe it was.
yeah.
Schofield.
Sarah Godlewski spent $600,000 on this campaign.
She was amazing.
She was with the
Message.
the trail all the time, and yet 50,000 votes. That tells you how deeply this split is.
Mm-hmm.
That almost half the population in this state is willing to walk into a voting booth and put a check mark next to a name for no other reason than there's an R
Yep.
right next to it.
Sure.
And that's what we've got to crack into.
So,
What percent did you get?
Yeah.
50.89.
So I'm going to do the deft segue to our next agenda item. And it's this. So we've talked about a lot of things in the last hour that go into the category of making ourselves smarter and really just getting our head in the game and being as sophisticated as we can. So here, let me pick out what I think is the piece of the conversation most pertinent to our immediate challenge. It's when we were talking about the driving of the healthcare issue, right? Like whatever the analysis, and it seems to fit, right, of Josh Call and whether he kind of split his message, or didn't have it apportioned right, and just didn't drive our healthcare advantage hard enough. Again, our job is to drive environmental issues for all they're worth. I think we should all come away from the conversation feeling like there's answers we don't have yet about how to do that, right? And there are some, Katie referred to them, as tactical questions that we need to keep working on. The strategic question is how to, what to commit to, what to point toward, and hold ourselves to as we go about that. And Dan put something on the table, which I want to kind of come back to.
Okay, well.
And it was basically that in every race, and when we're big enough that we can actually, affect every race, that'll be really exciting. We realize, that might take some time, but nonetheless, as a goal, in every race, we work to elevate, whatever is the, strongest environmental issues, we are raising them to top tier prominence everywhere.
Okay, and on that note,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's kind of that's an idea on the table. Again, we're early in a strategic planning, strategy setting, and at the moment we're looking at kind of what aims to set for ourselves. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, that's for the environmental group. We need, I think, really to start focusing on climate crisis, not climate change. We've all talked about how emotions are what's stirring people to vote. We need to start referring to this as what it is. It's the climate crisis. That is going to stir emotions in people. And, the climate crisis is tied into everything right now. The farming issues with the crops not growing and the seasons changing so quickly and the loss of a lot of things, a lot of the habitats simply because the invasive is taking over because the climate is affecting the natives and the healthcare issue. All of that kind of stuff is going to tie back into the climate crisis. And that is something I think we need to hugely focus on. Bad water, wetlands loss, that's going to come back to bite us too when we start getting more rain events and all these kind of things. And as far as even just the nation, our coastal regions are already being affected by this. And like I said, we need as an environmental group to start bringing this to the attention of people as a climate crisis. This climate change word's got to go. It's got to become climate crisis. That will stir emotions and get people moving.
There's a risk in using crisis, because I think crisis is an overused word.
Well, that's something that's close
Right.
to that.
Yeah, I understand what
We
you're.
only have, they're predicting 12 to 20 years. I think we are already beyond the tipping point personally, but I don't want to tell people that because I don't want people to go negative and say, well, then what's the point?
Right.
But we need to immediately start doing something, and it has to start at the top. It has to come from the bottom, but it's not because the legislators will tell you they don't hear anything about climate change. Well, that's because people just don't feel that it's something that has to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with soon. And if that's what one of our big issues is, that's what we're about, Environmental Caucus. We need to step forward with this and use a word that is going to emit emotions and get people to start getting off their duff and doing something about it, because we are literally running out of days here. There was an article in the USA Today about the doomsday clock. It's extremely scary. If you get a chance to read it, there was also an article in the Appleton Post-Press about the doomsday clock. It's not funny anymore.
I don't think it.
We need to really seriously address.
So I agree with you that climate, and the reason, so I agree, climate crisis or whatever you want to call it, However we message that is critically important. That's going to, and again, because I think people don't talk about it because it is sort of global and somewhat beyond their comprehension on how it connects with their lives. And here in central Wisconsin, because I'm so I'm on county board and on city council, so I'm an ambassador from the city or county board to the legislature on behalf of Portage County. And we went down to talk with the legislators, and the topic that kept coming up is water, clean water. Because many of the wells in Portage County, half of them in the town or the village of Nelsonville, are beyond the limits for nitrates. So those are very direct impacts to their lives, to their children's lives. So I think there's a couple of things going on. What you're talking about is this bigger issue, and messaging that is going to be really important because I agree we need to find ways to get people to care about this, to help them understand why it affects their lives. And I honestly think it's going to be a financial thing. But then there's also
Well, it
those.
is already.
I absolutely, but we haven't.
You talked to the Berkey. Did anyone see the documentary Saving Snow? I mean, that was all about the Berkey, and that was all about snowmobiling
Right.
and such things.
Absolutely.
Like that in Wisconsin, and how that industry itself is already struggling.
It's done.
And they can't do snowmobiles anymore because people don't.
Right.
They have no way to use them.
Absolutely, and let's make it about Wisconsin so people can really connect
Yep.
with it. So
Yep.
those kind of things, and I agree with you on the loss of wetlands and what that's going to mean for floods. Let's connect those things, but the reason the legislators don't hear from John and Jane Q. Public is because they are worried about the day-to-day things as it relates to the environment. And in this part of the state, it's groundwater, surface water, and farming practices.
I think one other thing.
All that I have to do is recommend.
I think one thing in general, just on many of the environmental issues, is that the way the messaging, as for better or worse, by worse, is
Yeah.
presented is that it's the environment versus the economy.
Correct.
And a lot of people, probably more so in rural areas, for example, because the economic base is not as robust, that there's a fear there. So I think one of the things on environmental, when we're talking about, say, green energy or sustainable energy, to talk about the economic benefits, economic development benefits, and stress that in conjunction with that. I think because that's where I think people have been presented with that. They're presented in the overall media sphere with this choice, or it's at least perceived that way.
Right. It's perceived as a choice. And I think there's a group of Republicans out there, and they're all fairly young,
Yeah.
and they're promoting green energy because they see there's money to be made.
Well, I want us to be careful in terms of, I'm not sure that what we need to do today is pick the issues, right?
Right, we need to-
Where should the focus
Right.
fall, right? If there's one thing that I've felt is important to keep sight of, and something I've kind of tried to always remind us, it's that yes, we're an environmental group, but let's remember there are lots of environmental groups. We have a difference. We're the only one that is, right in the middle of the political fray. We've just had a long conversation about elections, how they went, and what it takes to win them, and that's the unique thing about us, right? So, I think the key point, and it relates to this question of focus and how water quality and quantity issues have been so prominent. Some of the papers that we've developed over the past couple of years have talked about this idea of salience, right? That we just talked about the political challenge of the message penetrating, right? And so whatever issue we work with, we need to be working with something, because we're about getting votes. That just means, that whatever issues we're working on, they already need to be on people's minds.
Bring it into our neighborhood.
But,
Yep.
but today, and this is where this idea comes of that Dan has offered of just saying that we believe all over the state that our effort should go towards raising the profile, elevating these issues to be front and center, to almost be like healthcare in terms of how prominent. And so as we try and set goals for ourselves, that's one idea that's been offered. I'd like to hear others, but that it isn't about which issue. It isn't about the content. It isn't about the substance. It's about we're building an effort. We're making a plan. What's our ambition? One ambition that's been offered is highlight these issues so that as many places as we can, when Democrats are running against Republicans, we're there, talking about whatever the environmental issue is and making it work for us.
Katie was saying something. Oh, she was talking to herself.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Shannon.
So I think the intent of this meeting was to identify a couple of clear objectives, 2, 3, whatever, that we can focus on for the next couple of years, and then later flesh those out into various parts of those objectives. And I agree with Dan's proposal to try to elevate environmental issues in every campaign across the state that we possibly can. And I think that I sort of feel like that's going down from, down to the grassroots. And I also feel second the goal should be that we have to go up. In other words, we need to work with the Democratic Party to make sure that environmental messaging is placed much more higher importance within the party than it is currently. We just had a meeting at the table at the Democratic Party strategy meeting, saying, okay, but how is the environment? Because the environment is the next healthcare. Environment should be an issue that is not political. We need to, like I like to say, the roof of our house, trashing your house is not a political issue; it's a maturity issue. I think that we can agree across Republican and Democrat fields about that, and I think that might be one way that we can increase that percentage of Democratic voters.
Making environmental messaging a much higher priority for DPW leaders.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's one half, but I like the other part that she said too, which is also going down to the grassroots. And I know we all belong to a lot of different environmental groups. I have to be. We have a table in our Farmers Union Convention today with League of Conservation Voters. They've got 2 bumper stickers that are exactly like your meeting. One of them says, hunters, fishermen, and something love clean water. And the other one said, hikers, bikers, and something else, love clean water, or something like that. And it was like trying to get the environment to Wisconsin down. I think what you said about the state treasurer's race, and if we remember back to when they wanted to abandon the Wisconsin idea, when you dig at core things that Wisconsin has stood for that we've been proud of, that's when you see a sea change in activism and in feeling, frankly. 2 things we've been doing down here is we've been going to the Conservation Caucus meetings in every county and bringing resolutions. We just had 2 that we brought forth, go all the way to the state, DNR, Conservation Congress, and get passed. One was to reinstate, I call it the new no harm, called the prove it first, the mining one. Towards that, there was funding DNR for to restore funding and support for DNR to be an enforcement agency against polluters. So I think that working with groups like Conservation Congress, like League of Conservation Voters, going to their lobbying, networking, knowing that we can each trust each other and call each other up when we have a call to action. And just as important as getting the Democratic Party to back us up.
So-
And
so-
on that, the League of Conservation Voters Lobby Day is March 27th.
I'll
It is.
I'll inject one thing here that I think is an important point, though, that tails off of some of the things that David was just saying. And that is that we are in a unique position here versus other quote-unquote environmental groups because we have this direct association with the Democratic Party. And because of that, one thing that we have to be always conscious of, whether we're pushing message up to the party or down to candidates, however you want to see it, is that we have a politics of politics problem here.
Yeah.
One easy way for us to get into trouble very quickly is to adopt a position of some specificity on any subject, because you will very quickly find different environmental groups are ready to go to war if your position doesn't exactly match
Yeah.
theirs. And I've seen this so many times down in Dane County, where two groups that should be working together hand in hand and getting the same thing done will sit and just pound the table at each other over just 5 words
Sure.
in a message statement.
Not
So,
common, yeah.
Yeah, we
But there again, I think it's because we get into the weeds on it.
Mhm.
You know, it's like that throwing data at voters. I love information and data and knowledge. I don't mean let's dumb everything down, but if we keep it simple, clean water matters to Democrats.
yeah, that's the type of message. Yeah.
Amen,
Democrat policy encourages clean water,
amen.
public land, DNR enforcement.
So let me try.
I have 5
Concentration.
goals.
I have 2, and then we'll see how they relate.
Okay.
Right. So,
Yeah.
it seems like there's a positive response to this idea of complementary goals. Shannon talked about, kind of upward and downward. Might be a little better to think about it in terms of the center versus, kind of all around everywhere in the state. But here's how I understand these. As I say, I've got 2, and Melissa's going to see what might be missing, from them.
I will tell
So the kind of outward around the state, I would couch this way: bring strong environmental issues to the forefront of elections at all levels across Wisconsin.
Mine isn't as wordy, but that
Yeah,
works.
and especially
Okay.
from the DPW because
Well, no,
Yep.
and number 2, not changing very much from what Shannon said at all. Make environmental messaging a much higher priority for DPW leaders.
yeah, definitely.
So what's not there?
I have those first 2 again. Mine are much more abbreviated. However we wordsmith it, I don't care. I wrote down the one, someone on the phone said it, and I didn't catch who did it, is tying the environment to Wisconsin values. I absolutely love that. That is just so about why I got into environmental issues and got a degree.
How will we know if we've made progress on that?
We're just setting goals. Do not get ahead of yourself. So, the other is bring environmental values to every household. That's that grassroots, every neighborhood. And 5, drive votes to Dems. So how we measure outcomes and success are going to be different for each one of these depending upon the tactics, and they may be tactic driven. So there may be one tactic where we can have a measurable result, whereas maybe we won't have as concrete a bit of information. But this tying, I love it, it's just tying the environment to Wisconsin values. Wisconsin's the home.
Yeah, that is.
Gaylord Nelson.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah.
And we do that, it's part of messaging, but it's a very clear goal that brings us, when you look at that goal and you're starting that message, you're always bringing it back. Wisconsin is environmental values. Has been.
I mean, I understand it as an orientation, I understand it as a sense of what we're about.
Sure.
What I'm somehow not getting is how it's a goal, right? I mean, it's something we want to be doing,
But that
but
makes it a goal.
I think it could be more of a vision or part of the mission, right? Because like you have like usually missions, and then underneath that you have a vision, right? Neither one of those have any sort of quantitative or anything you can measure. It's just like a statement, right? So I think we don't want to build goals around it, but have that be a very clear, part of our vision. That can be like a small tagline afterwards, right? Like, however you want to do it, making responsible stewardship of the environment a shared Wisconsin value, or however you want to word it. Like that can be the mission. I don't think, to David's point, it's hard to build metrics around that, but it's certainly part of this. What we were discussing earlier, the messaging. That it's a shared value, regardless if you're a Democrat, Republican. We all value, the really rich natural resources in our state.
And don't get, I guess,
And speaking of Gaylord Nelson, one thing we need to get Tony Evers to do is to celebrate Earth Day and make some kind of an issue out of it, because for the last 8 years, that moron that was running the state never once even mentioned the words Earth Day. There were no Earth Day celebrations. In order to bring that back onto people's table, I think that should be something that Tony Evers does, is have an Earth Day celebration and make sure he mentions that several times, because that's been lost in the Republican shuffle.
So I think, in general, with this whole strategic planning, the mission and vision are really important. And I think the idea being is that if you have that set up first, and then you do like with a business or nonprofit,
yeah, we do already have.
Right, then you can start to look at that and start to
Right,
see what.
but we already have a mission.
Right, but
So-
the idea being that
Yeah.
let me offer
your
this.
initiatives are going to stem from that.
Let me offer this suggestion. So, ultimately, we're meant to have a strategic plan,
All right.
right? and Katie,
Leave and you come back and it's all done.
Katie is somehow confident that that's going to be happening soon. But what I was going to say instead was, I do understand the centrality of some of these ideas to what we're about. I'm just saying that in terms of the specification of goals and what they're supposed to be, and I'm now holding up the SMART goal thing, and what they're supposed to be:
Yeah,
smart,
well, I
measurable,
don't
attainable,
talk
results
about
oriented, time determined.
No, I do those every day. I'm
Yeah,
just,
I really feel like the two are distinct in doing more of that specification, that measurability.
How are you going to measure elevating the environmental messaging to the DPW? Because someone pays attention?
Oh yeah,
Because that's,
actually,
Yeah.
great. So let me pick up on exactly that idea. So we were, in a sense, indulged in the creation of this thing,
yes.
right? Oh, nice. How nice. Thank you so much. You're doing this
Right.
thing. That's lovely. That is different from having continuous interchange. We would see it in there being regular exchange between the center and us. We will see it instead of that one 3M press release on Schimmel that happened. We'd see the communication shop, cranking those out regularly. The same way as, I've said before that kind of holding ourselves up against healthcare and seeing the successes on healthcare as the kind of success we want to have. So that's my answer to your question. Yeah, that right now we're kind of on the margin of things in the party, and this is a goal about we would be used as a resource more. Kind of more.
That was our original goal, we'd be used as a resource, but what happens if they don't pay attention to us? Because I think that's a real strong possibility. Because I wanted to get a van list for my districts. It took a week and a half.
Oh, really?
And 3 calls. And so,
right. So this is where the connection comes to what we talked a bit about last month, which is that that there's starting to be internal fights that need to be taking place within the party about how all this is working, and the fact that we will encounter difficulties or could encounter difficulties or are likely to is not however you want to couch it, is not an argument against it as a goal.
No,
right?
I
as long
agree.
as it fits us and is something that we could see that it offers guidance for what we're going to do.
It is something that needs to be visible in terms of the challenge when we do the SWOT analysis.
Right, and the idea is it's that complementary idea that says we've got one major goal that looks out around the state at all the races. And we've started talking about many of the races in the analytical part of the meeting, and that fits perfectly, right? So that we've got one goal that says, as much as possible, we're going to be connected out and around everywhere around the state, helping win, out on the ground game, and as a complement to that, more of a center of the organization goal that has to do with how the connections between state party leadership and these issues and those of us working on them is going to be much tighter.
One of the things coming up, we've got, this is an election year for state officers. And yes, so, whoever we elect is going to pretty much dictate what happens to staffers and what they concentrate on. So the other thing is, again, we'll have resolutions for the party platform.
Right.
What we need to do is emphasize to each county chair environmental issues and make sure that they're all writing.
Well, that's a tactic.
But look how connected it is to the goal, right?
Yes.
There's the goal in action, right? That tells us that if we set a goal like this, then we infer from that.
But they're going to say why, and that's when we get into, again, back to tying it to Wisconsin values and to their households.
Why?
So, So these are all connected. So.
And that's where each county can bring its own issue into the resolution.
Right. Yeah, because it's going to be different in Kewaunee County than it is in La Crosse.
But the thing is, it's now a movement. We've got every county pushing environmental issues.
That's a good point.
And that is going to
horse
be.
it into the state party.
I just had an idea. What if we not, encourage that obviously, and as we're encouraging it, is there language as a caucus that we could suggest, right? So that these two things get married in all these resolutions, and they all say what whatever that burning local issue is.
messaging.
And they also say something about how we believe, how vital these are, both for the environmental heritage and precious natural resources of the state, and also our party taking advantage of its strongest issues. And so that if there were a lot of these resolutions and our group succeeded in some sort of, I don't know, overarching bit of language associated with them, that could be powerful, maybe.
Should probably ask anybody on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking to include folks on the phone, so.
I agree with what David just said. And part of the strategy might be also to, when working with the state party, it might be something Vic gave me the idea for kind of last night. He invited me to speak about the environmental caucus at the Lincoln County Democratic Party meeting. We start doing that all over the state. It is going to bump the relevance of the environmental caucus for the Democratic Party in general. It's true.
It's almost like a listening tour fits both goals.
Well, we had talked about doing that
No, we
before,
did. We
yeah.
definitely did.
So, yeah, listening tour, introduction tour,
It's
because
a
many of them
lovely-
probably,
Mhm.
we hang out here, we think everybody knows about us, and they
Mhm.
probably don't, so.
Well, another thing, the County Chairs Association is meeting the end of February in Plover.
Oh, yeah, that's right, it's at the,
Okay.
yep, at the one hotel,
Yeah.
yep.
At the one hotel.
Yeah, one of us needs to be there for sure. Absolutely.
And then there's congressional district meetings, right?
Right.
Yep.
In order to do any of these meetings, we need to have our goals and our strategy and our vision, like, laid out, so we can present that.
County chairs is again February what?
I thought it was the first weekend in March.
No,
No? Mine?
it is
Oh, we got the letter, I thought it was.
February 23rd and 24th. Best Western Hotel and Conference Center in Plover. I just got this.
Right. So what I'm hearing is,
We want to be on the agenda.
yeah, probably, and maybe try and capture some of what we talked about today. The one thing it might require of us is, we've got this fourth Wednesday pattern now, which wouldn't fit very well with this particular timeline. But I'm certainly open to pulling forward by a week. Idea being to both generally get ready to be making that self-introduction, but in particular to view county chairs meeting as an important meeting, and therefore we're not going to have developed the full-blown plan in the next 4 weeks.
Right.
But we might be able to make an outline to have to show to ourselves at places like that.
We've got a mission.
Mhm.
We're sanctioned.
Mm-hmm.
Our Constitution is there.
Mhm.
And we've identified what looks like a couple of goals and some strategy or some tactics to achieve those goals. I think that's a great framework, and it's easy to sell. It won't be too complicated. And I want to throw something else, though. I think this is a great idea, using that county chairs meeting. But also, I want to go back to the, making Earth Day cool. And I think it's appropriate from this group to send a letter to our newly elected governor to say, the Wisconsin Democratic Party or Democratic Party of Wisconsin Environmental Caucus asks you to do this, strongly encourages you. Elevating the importance of Earth Day and its roots will help us move forward and advance environmental issues.
Oh man, Melissa, You are this close to having volunteered to
I
draft
think
it.
I am, yes. I'll add it to my list.
CC that, be sure to the Lieutenant Governor, who, by the
Okay.
way, is a party officer as
Ah.
well. Let's not forget that.
So I will draft that letter and send it out. I would want everybody to proof it. It's not gonna be more than a couple of paragraphs. I will identify, capture our goals, and why we wanna do that is because we want to bring the environmental issues to Wisconsin values and send it out, and then we would get that going. So
Thank you very much. I'll volunteer to, I'm referring to it as an outline. That's at least kind of most helpful way I can think, right? That to take the strategic planning discussion as far as we have so far, and summarize it, getting ready for county party chairs in late February. What I wanted to press is whether maybe it's worth it to in February meet third Wednesday instead of third Wednesday instead of fourth Wednesday.
well, can I have healthcare center committee on the third?
How about the second Wednesday? Is that good to work for anyone?
Yeah, that actually it would. I'm going to be out of town week after next, but I think we'd be talking about the week after that.
Yeah, that's the 13th. And I'm cool with that, so.
I am out.
That works
Sorry.
for me.
Out of the country again?
No, second Wednesday of the month is Dane County Party.
Oh, okay.
So we would have a little problem with you two broadcast.
What time does the Dane County Party meet though?
They meet in the evening 6. Well, okay,
Sure.
beers are at 6, meetings at 7.
Make them important start.
Well,
Is
okay,
there something
listen.
we can do earlier?
Or, I mean, I realize we're already fussing with, we had a monthly time, and we're going to get back to it. But what if we looked at not the 14th, how about the 12th?
It kind of like Saturdays.
Yeah, I was about to say, does a weekend work?
Works better for me.
Same.
Yeah?
This
Yeah,
is the
okay.
first time.
Works a lot better for me.
Yeah, all right.
This Saturday, can we do like a 4 o'clock? 3 o'clock is kind of early for me, and 4 o'clock would be much better.
Yeah, I can push
Which?
it.
Which Saturday?
Well, the 23rd, we wouldn't want, we
Oh,
would want to prep it in
about
advance.
16th.
The 16th is open,
February 16th.
or I'm 5 blocks away, so it doesn't matter.
4 p.m. and 4 to 5:30.
Perfect.
And I'll be out of town on the 16th. That's fine.
16th?
All right.
This Saturday seems to, this is great. We've got a good group. Great exchange of ideas, even with the folks on the phone, and I know that's really hard, but yeah,
And
4.
on that note, I'm sorry, but I had 2 events today that both canceled because of the weather, so I was able to join you today, but I do have an event at 5:30 that I'm not canceling, so I am going to have to buzz off.
Yep.
Okay.
So I will mark my calendar for March
Thank you very
16th
much.
at 4 p.m. Okay?
Perfect.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like we've done extremely well in terms of what we came here to do.
David?
There's one other issue that we haven't talked about. Is that Shannon?
It's Shannon.
This is Pat. I'm here.
Oh, that's Pat. Pat said, David,
I
you.
was just looking, oh yeah, Pat said David. I was just looking at the Democratic Party, I guess it was the platform you sent to us, the PDF. And you see your first paragraph there under environment, which I think is a perfect way to start off that letter that you want to send to Governor Evers, or even as a starting point for the letter or document or some speech or whatever you want to do to the county president. Just stating that we live in a beautiful state. It's our duty to protect it. Every Wisconsinite deserves to live in a community with clean air, clean drinking water, and clean soil. Healthy natural resources, make healthy communities, and I would add, and healthy economy.
Where is that?
Is that in the state platform?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
the one that says environment.
Okay.
And then also, if you want to add anything to it, add our very first page introduction,
That's from,
No.
no,
was once a place where if you work at the place, you know, you can live a good life. So, you know, I don't know. I really like that first paragraph because it just says what we're saying is that, and it appeals to that idea of values, what we believe about Wisconsin, and what it's going to take to keep Wisconsin that way and repair the damage. We don't have to say that part about repairing the damage that's already been done, but we all know that that's true.
Thanks. Thanks.
I'll incorporate that in somehow, but yeah.
Before we move on
Yeah.
to where I know you're about to go, just to tack something onto the end of what we've been discussing. This is a officer election year, that's been pointed out, state convention. Do we want to try to push for 10 minutes of podium time
Yeah,
at the convention?
Sure.
why not?
That's executive committee stuff, David, so that's you,
Administrative meeting.
or administrative, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then we've got to figure out who's going to do it,
Right.
how we're going to do it, but we got to get it.
Shannon,
Okay.
she's like a superhero. Everybody saw her on TV.
Sorry, Shannon, it's you.
The matter is settled, okay. Got it, duly noted. Yes, I was gonna say a
Wait a
couple.
minute,
I was
did
gonna-
it happen there?
We'll tell you tomorrow.
You're
Yeah.
speaking at state convention.
Katie and I'll let you know the next time we go to lunch.
No, yeah, what I was gonna say is,
Whomever.
our having done as well, certainly from my perspective, as we have in terms of what we needed to do today, I'm optimistic about ending before 2 hours. But I am aware of another issue that we could discuss that's been on Shannon's mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Shannon, are you ready to raise
Yes,
it?
yes, let me just clarify something quickly. The 15th, the meeting on the 15th,
16. Yep.
is that instead of our 27th meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So my thought is about our Facebook page and the larger issue as it relates to our group on our Facebook page is our name, this WPREN thing that we somehow decided to keep on there, kind of trying to disguise that we're actually a part of the Democratic Party. And I've made more and more uncomfortable with that. I really think that we have no reason to do that. We are part and parcel of the Democratic Party, and I think we should update and get rid of the WPREN. I think it's time.
So disguise is a rather strong word. Because we weren't quite trying to deceive. There was an intention, but that there's a valid question that you raised, despite our intention, right? So the intention was that we'd sort of have two names, right? That we'd have I don't know, Clark Kent and Superman. I don't know.
Well, part of it is we weren't sanctioned, so we couldn't say we were the Democratic Party's environmental
But we did
caucus.
say that we liked it and wanted to try to have two names, and I think Shannon is right to press the question of whether we could get called on that, basically, right? Like,
Right.
You know,
You want to be a part of us.
it's kind of tricky to pull off, and while we thought, we saw a reason to try, Shannon's raising a reason to not try, and what are those things? I think she might be right.
So I will push out a devil's advocate argument on this, which is that the
Devin
one
has the
thing.
best lawyers.
Yeah. One of the reasons that we pushed out the Progressive Environmental Network was because if we don't have that sort of vehicle, we are going to be hampered by the party. we can't speak officially on behalf of the party. So
Now I remember.
yeah, if we don't have that vehicle to put our own messages out, we are going to have to send everything up to Madison and ask them to put it out for us.
No.
And we've already had experience with that.
Two points in response. One is that the way that you deal with this is you simply slap unofficial on, and it's like the cheap little trick, but that actually, I mean, I call it a trick, but it seems to kind of make everybody happy. Is one thing. So that's point one. Point two, I understand the sensitivity. I know the problems that can result. At the same time, heck, we can't even get their attention. And, I say this as somebody with a propensity to worry, and who takes rules seriously in many contexts. But of all the things to worry about, basically, Shannon's posed one worry, right? If somebody at some point saying, what is this with this alter ego or pseudonym, stage name that you use? What is that about? What are you trying to get away with here, right? So that's like one scenario to worry about, set of worries, and the other is being told no by the DPW, and I'm not so worried about that. No.
Oh, I think there could be a time when we would go, we want to worry about that, because there may be something pressing that we need to push out, and it's not a priority for our friends in Madison, and we sit on our hands because.
Well, I'll confess to not following through on a related previous decision on this, which was that what we would do on the Facebook page is we'd basically say a project of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin Environmental
Couldn't it be
Caucus.
in the about?
Yes, it should be. I mean,
Or even
I couldn't
directly
figure
on
out how to fuss with that
Yeah.
on the Facebook page. I couldn't find my way into the place to do that.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was going to propose, is that I think that there's a middle ground between relying on the party and relying on ourselves.
Right.
Shannon, where are you at if we simply, rather than getting rid of the alter ego, instead just make it abundantly clear that the alter ego is tied directly to the caucus and the party?
And
I think that's an improvement. I think so. Another reason that I think we're getting rid of it has to do with the objective that we just discussed about elevating the cause of the environment within the party, elevating the environmental caucus within the party. I mean, we can't do that and still leave ourselves room to hide. I think we have to go boldly about that. But if we agree to have it very clear that this is a project of the environmental caucus, I think that is an improvement.
I mean, and one of the reasons too.
I have an idea.
please.
This is Pat,
Yeah.
and I live in a county that calls itself Green County Democratic Progressives.
Say that again?
Green County Dems
Green
and
County
Progressives.
Dems and Progressives.
Oh.
Right, the intention of choosing the name was, the intention was that you could infer, right? I mean, progressive.
Not going to find a progressive Republican.
Right,
Yeah.
can be and often is a synonym for Democrats, and so that we when we came up with the name, we didn't mean to hide.
No,
We just meant to use, a paraphrase basically.
Well, and
And I specifically used the party symbol, the donkey,
Mhm.
in green.
Which I did import into the Facebook page. That's the way,
Yeah.
I did do that.
So we.
David, I hate to contradict you, but I do recall conversations, and I don't remember who else said this, but that we were worried that people would associate us with the Democratic Party and they wouldn't like the Democratic Party, and that's why we were keeping the name.
Fair point. No, that's a fair point. And that is a fair point, and
You could change your mind.
it's a very strong argument
Yeah.
in terms of
That was
the
a great
relationship to the goal. I think to observe that there's a possible tension between saying we want to have this effect on the DPW and then having a pseudonym, there might be a contradiction there.
I think that was actually, at least partly me bringing up that point, that people like the League of Conservation Voters, et cetera, tend to shy away.
But we've also, okay, but that is not a strong argument, because as we've gone on, that sense that we are an unusual, that we're a unique environmental group, that we're going to be the most political, the most partisan, that's not a good argument in terms of our perception of other environmental groups. No.
Yeah, I have a note to add on that. After working with Sean, Casey, and other folks from the league, is that they have that wall. So as much as they may be Democrats in their private life, when they're wearing their League of Conservation, voters have to be neutral. They can't.
Right.
We can't coordinate. That's the word. We can't coordinate.
Are we starting
In other
to
words,
tilt?
they could endorse Chris Marion, and a whole bunch of them from Green County go up and sell League of Conservation voters signs supporting Chris Marion's endorsement by them. But they couldn't come to us with Green County, Wisconsin progressives and say, hey, why don't you do this for us?
So are we starting?
That's a fine line, that wall.
Are we starting to now tilt towards Shannon's view of
I'm not.
no? So Melissa's not persuaded.
No.
Okay.
I think that there's a middle ground that we can stake out.
And
That's
I'm going to
better.
give my rationale. Building relationships first is the way to start having different kind of conversations. So it's kind of like, so I always give the Dick Cheney example. He was always anti-gay, and then his daughter came out, and then it was like, well, maybe it's okay because it's my daughter. So you build a personal relationship. It's like with my customers. Many of them are very conservative, but because we build a personal relationship, we can actually have a rational discussion about the environment or other things as it relates to actual political discussions. And they are rational. I mean, you were out with Richard Gums, my gosh, and that's because you had a personal relationship with him.
Yeah, but I also think that we are both saying we're part of the Democratic Party. We're sanctioned by the Democratic Party, but we're not Democrats, maybe. Like, it's kind of a weird suspension of something here.
And also, I think at some point, if you do that, then you're
I have
just,
an idea. What if we employ our plan of going through the counties and going to our convention, and we can believe it now and see what our reception is. And
Well,
if they're willing to bring some shine when they could be demonstrated to the Environmental Caucus, they will be.
well, no, I think it's serving. The only purpose that it's serving is to give ourselves this room to not be clamped down on our freedom of action by the authorities within the party. And
That's not what you just said.
That-
That's different, right?
I
is a
know.
different
I'm saying that as I view this problem and what drives us in terms of how we handle it, I don't see the main issue as being how are we received, by the grassroots, grass tips, whatever. That's not central to the issue. So we haven't reached a consensus right here, right now. So here's what I propose. That what we do now is not cut loose the alternate name, for the time being. Keeping the question and the concerns open, we may, in the months ahead, decide that we do want to drop the name. But for now, be careful with its use, including more disciplined in the thing that we discussed many months ago of particularly in an important context like the front of the Facebook page, to put the two names together in the way of Wisconsin Progressive Environmental Network, a project of. And so that's what I propose for the time being. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we need to determine the purpose of the Facebook page. If it's to just talk to other Democrats, then we obviously have stronger Democratic Party messaging. But because I invited a lot of people on my Facebook friends, as soon as they start seeing a partisan message, they're going to block it. So if it's to just talk to the choir, then we do that. If it's to talk to a broader audience, I would caution.
Well, I see the clock.
Elisa, can I respond to that? My idea, who is it that you think is going to be receptive to our message, but would be highly concerned if they found out that we were actually with the Wisconsin Democratic Party? I think that's a very, very limited set of people there.
Well, that's why I think we have to determine what the purpose of the Facebook page is. So.
That's true. That's true. Somebody on the phone said it, that there are a lot of organizations out there that are sort of apolitical. Here from League of Conservation Voters.
Right.
They ride the fence. We are not in that position.
I
We are not riding. We are helping Democratic candidates talk about the environment.
I don't see a consensus emerging on this.
But I have a
I would tend to agree with that
Okay.
first. And then I think the other thing is, if you have two names that are floating out there, people can think it's two different groups, or they'll get confused on what's what. And so I think that's something to think about as well. If we have the DPW Environmental Caucus, then just say it.
Does Matthew get everything cleared for the Progressive
He
Caucus?
uses unofficial.
Yeah, I think does he have DPW Environmental?
Yes, he does.
Yeah, but he's out there
That's
posting a lot of
that's
stuff.
why
so
I said.
I don't think he's following the rules.
and
I'm fine with not following the rules.
I will, I wanted to let the philosophical discussion go.
Thank you. From an attorney, that's really kind
Yeah.
of surprising.
But now I'm gonna bring in the practical aspect of it, is that if we drop it, we also lose our communication channels. We lose the mailing list, we lose the webpage, we lose the forums, and we become dependent upon party mechanisms
Ew.
to replace that.
Well, practically that makes the most sense to me right now, so.
But yeah, like I said, I wanted the philosophical side of it to push forward, because that may be the cost that we have to pay if we decide that it's there. But it's a consideration that has to be to be brought into.
That's a big
They've got
concern.
they've got the strings, and and it's unfortunate because
Now, we could theoretically do, as you said, we could set up this unofficial thing.
Mm-hmm.
We could change everything over to DPW Environmental Caucus.org or something like that to make it more clear. There's a financial impact with that. That
if this does force the issue in a way. I hadn't thought through.
So anyway, I think that we gotta let
We're
it.
not in a position to. Now I know that we're not in a position to decide to drop the name today.
Yeah, that's what I said. I think we need to let it percolate. Let's revisit this in a couple of weeks when we meet again.
well, it might be a way for them to pay attention to us if we're not following the rules.
Yeah, that's
So.
there is always that.
Yeah.
You can act out like a teenager.
There you go. It works.
So there are a lot of things that we've talked about here today that we will be returning to on the 16th. I'll only say that I would be comfortable with this issue taking longer for us to figure
Oh,
out.
absolutely.
So I'm not looking at the February 16th agenda for us to decide this, that it's going to be that much clearer in just a few weeks.
10-4.
Thank you very much again, everybody. Wow, we had 100% of the board plus.
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 Yes.
And that plus representing geographic diversity, which we've known for a long time. If we're talking about, watching metrics of progress, this initiative has been driven from 4 counties. And it's been centered in 4 counties. And being better connected to more is a crucial metric of our progress. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
February 16th.
I have to ask you 2 ladies. a
Thanks,
question.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Before we leave.
Yes, yes.
I just want to know if Stevens Point Co-op is